And at the end of the day, it's about helping people be successful.
Yep.
So whatever it takes to help them be successful. I mean, if they got to think about it a certain way, if it's got to be compartmentalized, that's why this tool is really cool, because if it helps people have more success, we're all for it.
Adam, I think we've kind of talked about markets and volatility and money markets and rates and cash. All this kind of brings to mind kind of the just big picture, right? And we can sit here as advisors and talk about what we're seeing on the S&P and the inflation rate and interest rates and all that. But really, the behind the scenes work in the area that I know that we all focus on a lot is financial planning, right? As Jason mentioned earlier, it doesn't really matter what the S&P 500 does necessarily. It's relative to how you're doing in achieving your long-term goals and short-term goals, and how we're structuring or managing money according to those things. And so I know we all attack things from a plan first versus a allocation or a index or a stock or an investment. And things that are hard to visualize for clients in times of volatility or up down markets is the big picture. And one of the things that we've been using a little bit more here that we've always done, it's just something we've done behind the scenes with less visibility for clients, but it's managing expectations kind of in the short term versus long term, today versus 25, 30 years from now. And I think you're going to talk about a little bit of one of those the software that we're using here that kind of visualizes that and kind of shows that for clients too.
Yeah, so we basically started using a new piece of software. It's like Kyle mentioned, it's something that we've always done, but again, we see things a little bit differently than the average client. We've always kind of done this within one portfolio where you have your more conservative stuff and maybe your moderate stuff and your more aggressive stuff, and they all play their own role, and we know where to take money from at which times. But recently, again, started using a new piece of software that actually helps break this out and helps clients to visualize exactly what's happening. And I think more than anything, it's intuitive and it gives good peace of mind. So it's basically time segmentation. It's a time segmentation strategy. The software is Income Conductor. We call it the lifetime income model. And if you want to put up the chart, just a time segmentation chart, and we'll just kind of, again, this is just designed to show how it works. You basically break it into 5-year tranches. So you can see at the bottom the time horizon is 5 years, then 10 years, then 15, then 20, and then 25. And the idea is you put your most conservative call it cash or cash alternatives in the first bucket, and then each subsequent bucket gets progressively a little bit more risk. And with risk comes reward, right? Nobody wants risk, but they want return. So in your first bucket, you have cash. So if the market goes down for 5 consecutive years, it affects your bucket not at all. When you get to the second bucket, hopefully that's appreciated, but conservatively, then you start to spin that bucket down, and so on and so forth with the third, the fourth, and the fifth. So what it does, it allows clients to sort of put off or not panic with current market fluctuations, because if you're not going to need a certain bucket of money for until year 16 to 20, then you can be a little bit less focused on what it's doing today or tomorrow or in the next month or year to date, because you have your conservative stuff that you're spending down and it's not fluctuating. So it's a really neat piece of software. Like I said, each bucket increases in risk just a little bit. I mean, you set your own target returns based on what a client needs and what the market will yield. But it's, like I said, it's something that clients have found valuable.
From an application standpoint, I'm sorry, Chris, but kind of like you said, Adam, it's stuff that we've all done behind the scenes, right? We always have pockets of money in a portfolio that are designed for short-term needs, right? You're not, overly aggressive with the money that's earmarked for today or, tomorrow. It's more the long-term stuff. But what happens is, when markets move, clients look at their statement, they look at their portfolio, and they see that market movement, and that's the emotional side. So it helps kind of put a piece that, yes, the market or the total portfolio did move with the market, but if we look at each sleeve, so this is the money that you are set to spend based on your financial plan over the next 5 years. Guess what? It didn't move. And so you're still okay. Yeah. And so, we talk about all the time, it's staying the course and staying with a plan. And a lot of times clients will react, or people react to negative news and negative markets and hurt themselves by getting out. And so it's also a tool to put that visually for clients to understand that's part of the plan, and the stuff that we're using today is not affected, and hopefully get them to stay the course longer.
All I was going to say is that we're always trying to get better at what we do, right? Always trying to improve. And this is just another way to illustrate something that is really intuitive for people. If you talk to younger people, they say, well, I know I can take more risk because I have a longer time frame, right? And people that are right at retirement's door are already retired. They know they can't take a ton of risk because they just don't have as much time. And all this does is break those time periods up a little bit more, and again, make it an easier to illustrate strategy. So longer term money, you can, relatively speaking, you should take more risk because you have more more capacity to grow it and live off of other things in the meantime. So,
and like we talk about, I don't think people understand. So I feel like people in general understand the power of compounding when you're saving money. When you're saving and investing money and preparing for the time when you're going to eventually use that money, they understand that, hey, if I have more time, like the money will grow more, it'll get bigger. This is all positive things, right? I'll have more to spend. But then when they click into this completely different phase, distribution phase, right? You're not adding any more money. Now you're actually taking it out. It completely, to me, their mindset changes. It's not about growing the money anymore. Now it's just about spending it. It's almost like I got it and I just can't let it go. But when you see this tool and you see the power of compounding on those longer term buckets, you may end up taking out many more times the amount of money and income that you started with, because you're growing the money. If you put it all in cash and just basically say you had a couple $1 million, you put it all in cash and you start spending it down, well, that's great. You got a couple $1 million and you spend it down, but you get very little growth out of that. So we tried to create just a sample. Again, this is just for illustrative purposes. This is a hypothetical. This is just this here chart, just real quick, is another visual on how this works if you're not understanding. Again, first phase, the blue line going down as you're spinning it down, the other three buckets over time continuing to go up. And then you get to the second phase and you spin that one down. And then you go to the third phase, you spin that one down. So you can kind of see each of the buckets not being spent down is growing, hopefully, over time. That's the idea. And then you get to that phase and you spend the money down. Do you want to go real quick to the sample model with the graph? Yeah, so this gives you a little bit of a visual on how the buckets work. So again, five segments. I'll explain the legacy longevity a little bit, but you got 5 segments, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Each are 5 years. And you can see it's kind of like a wave that, the yellow gets spent down first, and then you get into the next segment, you spend down the purple. The next segment, you spend down the orange, then the blue, and then eventually and finally the gray. So what the legacy part is if you have a plan and you need, in this case, clients with $3 million and they need $10,000 a month, inflation, I think we have set at 3%. Basically, that's the money that you're not planned to use over the life of the plan. So this is about a 30-year plan. And I want to say, we'll look at the next slide here in a second, but I want to say it's a couple $100,000 that you put in the legacy bucket because you're not planning to use that. Well, that's invested over time, and that continues to grow. So in this particular example, again, a lot of assumptions. I think the segments are set at, cash returns for the first one, which is like 2%, and then 3% for segment 2, 4% for 3, 5% for 4, and 6% for segment 5. And then I think the legacy longevity bucket is set at like 6.5%. So again, blended still very conservatively, but it's an example. So you have $3 million. You go through this whole process. You can see at the bottom, if everything goes exactly to plan, I want to say the income number is $5.6 million. And again, this is with 3% inflation. So you take out many more times the amount of money that you put in. And then at the end of the day, because you had that legacy bucket that was continuing to grow and you never used it, you still have an additional $2.2 million. Again, to be fair, this is not in today's dollars. This is inflated numbers, but that's a pretty powerful. It's a pretty powerful visual to see that you can take $3 million, grow it to that point, spend all that income, and still have money left over.
And Adam, I mean, this is, like you said, it's a sample client and it's a sample scenario, and so the the point of this visual is not to say these are the numbers and this is how this works. It's more to visualize the buckets and the idea of the more conservative investments to start and then more aggressive investments at the end, but also the importance of both, right? So the short-term money is more conservative because we're spending that today. We need it. We can't afford,
Right.
we don't want to see it fluctuate, but we also, like most people now, retire 60, 65 and may live till 80, 85, 90. You have 30 plus years in retirement too. And so
Yeah.
there is
Mhm.
buckets of your money that need to be invested to help outpace inflation and grow. And that shows, like you said before, that the power of the compounding and the importance of having different levels of risk, if you will, inside of different parts of your money.
I think the other important thing to note on this too is these are average return assumptions. So nobody's portfolio will look like this, because if you have an aggressive, say the segment 5 in the legacy longevity bucket, which is invested more aggressively, there are going to be periods where that bucket is, down considerably, because that's what you get with that type of risk. So it would never look like a straight line like this. But again, if you're talking averages over a long period of time, that's what you're trying to average out to. So it's a visual on how it works. So we can flip over to the other slide real quick, the detail slide. And it just gives, it gives you the numbers. Just again, you don't have to look at all this. It's just the top part where it shows basically each, the amount that needs to go into each segment for this plan to work. So you can see in the first segment, $430,000. In the next segment, it's $615,000. But the idea is over 5 years or 5.5 years, that grows to $723,000, and then you start to spin that down. And then the next segment's $553,000, segment 3, and that grows over 10 years, and it grows to $838,000. Again, using these average return assumptions. So at the top, you see the amount that goes into each segment, and if you add in all those segments, add up all those segments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the legacy longevity, which is $340,000, you get to that $3 million number. So again, just an illustration for how this, works in practice. We've always done this. We have conservative stuff. We have cash alternatives. We have moderate stuff. We have more aggressive stuff inside a portfolio. But to have portfolios split out into actual, different accounts or different segments that clients can see, I think it's going to, we've used it a little bit with clients already, and it's been, very, very well received. And I think it's something that'll become, pretty standard going forward.
Adam, I think for the clients too, it's not that their investments would really look that different. In fact, they probably wouldn't look different at all. It's almost kind of like a way to compartmentalize your emotions with this, because when
100%.
we've got folks, I just retired, I can't take any risks, so let's just put everything in CDs. But the client is, let's say, a very healthy 65-year-old, and there's a very good chance they could live 30 years. It's like, okay, wait, so even the money that you're not going to touch till you're 90, that should also just be in CDs rolling for 30 years. Well, so I mean, it's a way to say, okay, this bucket of money, that's my money when I'm 85 years old.
You know what the irony of that is? Like we talked about earlier, no 35-year-old would say that. If you were 35 and you had 30 years until you needed the money, they wouldn't do CDs. But if they're 65 and they're not going to need the money until 95, in a 30-year plan, CDs are the answer. Again, it's just
because a 35-year-old can always go back to work, and that's the way. And it's an emotional. But the
market, but the market doesn't react based on how old you are or whether you can go back to work or not. It's purely a risk and return game. So again, like we were talking about earlier, people think differently in an accumulation phase than they do in a distribution phase, and I think this really helps people get the right mindset in a distribution phase and take an appropriate amount of risk and move their money forward and really make the best of the money they've saved.
Well, appropriate amount of risk with the right money type, right?
For sure.
With the specific amounts that are designated for those other buckets. So, yeah, no, I think it's super powerful, and another tool that goes along with the plan.
I think we said before, it's, I feel like half of our job throughout the day is just kind of being a psychologist through times, right? And it's keeping clients from doing things that are going to potentially hurt themselves in the long run, right? And so it's, making sure clients have a plan and that we're adhering to it, but helping them adhere to it too. And so if we can utilize software to help show and give clients that visual understanding of, yes, we've already been doing this, but this is what it actually looks like. So yes, you're looking at this pool of money and it's down 10%, but of this pool, this is a mark that's set aside that hasn't moved that you're spending right now. And so,
Yeah.
like I said, it's managing client reactions to try to keep them on track with their plans and invested for the long haul, if you will.
And at the end of the day, it's about helping people be successful.
Yep.
So whatever it takes to help them be successful. I mean, if they got to think about it a certain way, if it's got to be compartmentalized, that's why this tool is really cool, because if it helps people have more success, we're all for it. And I think it does, and it really sends a powerful message when you look at it and visualize it.